like, my son is missing a finger. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, and I'm just looking at his finger like, I don't know.
Or the lack of.
Yeah.
If you were looking at it, they came to the right person.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to our podcast. Today, we've got an amazing episode ready, and it's going to be on ministers' kids. Okay, so I'm Kolby.
I'm Sam.
I'm Josiah.
I'm Bella.
And we all have been ministers' kids. We're going to talk about the nitty-gritty of what all that's been like. Before we get into this, I just want you to like, subscribe, and comment. And if you're a minister's kid, we want to see it in the chat. If you have similar situations and stories that we're going to talk about, we'd love to hear it. All right, so to get started, what are some difficulties in being a minister's kid? Or maybe before we get into that, what specifically, like, were your parents pastors or missionaries?
Yeah, I'll start. My parents were actually youth pastors when I was born, and then they did various roles throughout my life, actually. So they were worship pastors at one point, and now they're lead pastors. So I've been kind of in that PK role of each pastor's role. So it was interesting on my end. Yeah.
My parents were senior pastors when I was born out in Denver, Colorado. So
Sweet.
Yep.
When I was born, my parents were campus pastors and living on support. And over the years, it shifted. Now my mom is more of like an itinerant speaker, and my dad runs youth ministry in Nashville.
Yeah, my parents were missionaries out in Africa for like, gosh, I don't even know how long. So like, we did that. They like lived off of all that, like off of support and stuff. And then my dad started doing itinerant speaking and then became CEO of Global. So not really, it's more like minister / kind of missionary kid. You can see those like missionary like mindset things sometimes in the way I think. But yeah, that's kind of got a mix of a few things. But yeah.
So we've all kind of been in the position where you feel like you're seen in a certain light because of what your parents do.
Yeah.
So what are some things, if you can think about some friendships or how relationships have been different or affected by what your parents did just growing up or even now?
I'll take it. Initially thinking about this question, I realized that a lot of the things growing up were self-inflicted.
Gotcha.
So I grew up in a public school system. So I would go to school and I would think to myself, I am a pastor's son. Mm-hmm. So it kind of affected me more than it probably did anyone else around me.
Yeah.
First, they probably wouldn't even have known that to begin with. Mm. And then secondly, I just kind of carried that identity, which is not a bad thing, but I think it affected the barrier that I would put up with people, that I wouldn't let them into maybe the life of a pastor's son.
So you felt like it was harder to connect with people that weren't in the same situation.
Right. I felt like no one would really understand. So that created an obvious barrier initially for me,
I mean, kind of hinting on the difficulties, but then but like we have expectations put on us. We have people watching us nonstop within the church. And so you have like a little sense of this pressure of like, oh, I got to live up to a certain thing because people are watching me. I got to behave, all these things. So within that, relationship-wise and friendship-wise, it was like, ooh, I almost like didn't show at a certain point in my life, like show someone every bit of me,
right?
Or like, be true fully to who I am, because I was like, ooh, they could like judge me because I'm the pastor's kid,
right?
You know?
Yeah. Oh, I get that.
When did that like settle that like you're like, because now you think about it, you're like, there was actually kind of, yes, there was pressure, but at the same time, I feel like when I think about it, I was the person who was putting the pressure on myself to try, because like you try to live up to your parents' standards. Like, when did you realize that it was like, actually, it was myself, and like, how did it change after that?
Like an age of understanding
type
of thing? I'd probably say middle school. I think that's even when like young people are starting to realize maybe popularity scales, and they're trying to like understand the dynamic, especially socially. So in middle school for me, I kind of just went to this place of I need to protect this part of my life from people seeing it because then it'll ostracize me.
Yeah.
That's when I was first aware and worried about people receiving me as a
Yeah.
person.
Yeah.
That makes
So like 7th grade.
I
maybe?
think especially early on for me, I didn't even really realize what my parents did. I was
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
"Whoa, we're just having another one of those nights where tons of people are coming over."
Yeah.
Or my dad would have like 30 guys from the football team in our house just eating
Right.
all of our food and playing video games, and I'm like,
This
"Oh,
is
I guess
normal.
this is just
This
what
is like
Yeah,
your
it's
happens."
just
normal
life,
life.
yeah.
And so
That's what
I
it
didn't
is,
really realize, like growing up, I didn't realize exactly what was going on. And then around, I would say that age, like middle school, around that time, my dad wasn't doing as much like in the home with that, and my mom was traveling. So I think I have a different experience because the influence or the groups that she'd speak to were like, it wasn't one group on a weekly basis.
Yeah.
So I get it in glimpses, but it wasn't like this community who had eyes on me
Yeah.
constantly, like
Yeah.
a lot of PKs.
What was that like for you growing up on the mission field in some part, and then like
Yeah. Well, so I was never like on the missions
Right.
field, like in Africa, like the rural, but I was very much like, we would go places with my dad, like he would speak, and like people would like give you presents. They would give you like, and that felt like such a win. Like, like you go somewhere and then someone would like give you a gift because you're like, oh, you're the speaker's daughter. People are trying to like woo you, make a good impression. Like that's just kind of what I got at a young age too. And I'm not gonna lie, I probably took advantage of that as a kid. Like I was like, oh, like do you want to get
Yeah,
close
you
to my
know,
dad? Like, oh, like I really want that drink over there. Like,
Get
do you
that
want to
for
meet?
me?
Not saying it's a good heart, but like, I think that was. And then like once I got older, like I think what became most like prevalent, I think it's the right word,
Yeah.
was like I started realizing that like the connections that were like I had in my life, and like the connections with different ministries and like things like that. So I just got to like now, even like right now, I'm still walking through like processing that and like what it looks like to still, I don't know, just kind of walk through that with my dad, like where he goes, and just kind of. But yeah, I don't think I ever felt that like pressure to like hold up. I think I was kind of like, I feel weird about like letting people come over to my house or like see my family in their like in our like just normal form, because my dad would come to our school and he would speak at our chapels, so people were like, oh my gosh, your dad's so cool, your dad's and I was like, oh my gosh, like they're literally gonna think he's so weird when they see him at home like playing Fortnite, and like they're not gonna think of him. And so like I think part of me kind of wanted to protect,
Yeah.
but like, which was so odd, like that's not right at all, but like that's kind of like where my head was at, like growing up like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do y'all
But-
have any like specific stories that you can think of like how like people treated you differently, or like kind of like you were saying,
Yeah.
like with the drink, or
The, like,
like
wooing,
trying to take advantage of that, or like the temptation of that? Do you guys have any stories that you can think of that people could relate to?
Maybe not like
open us up.
specific like on point stories, but
Yeah.
it was like, you'd get the random people that you'd see every Sunday morning that like sit in the back aisle, but they'd feel comfortable enough to like come up and talk to you.
Yeah.
And so you're like, I don't really know your name, but they're asking questions like, oh, how's your family? And it's like,
You're just like, who
I
are
don't
you?
know
Like, what are you doing?
It
Yeah,
opens
yeah.
up. But there's that, and then like, I don't know, parents kind of would introduce their kids to me.
Yeah.
Meeting
Be
so
like,
many people.
oh,
my
yeah,
gosh.
so many.
Yeah.
And so it's like, you have like that little bit of expectation, like, oh,
Is there
they're
like a
trying to
motive
make me
behind it?
be
Yeah.
friends with their
Right.
kids, But
Maybe
Yeah.
more than friends with their children.
maybe more at times, yes. Yeah.
Arranged
The
marriage,
dog
actually.
is just
arranged
being
marriage,
pushed toward
yeah.
you.
Trying to set you up.
So funny.
No, yeah, I think that's such a reality too. Like the people who know more about your life and you've never met them.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
So
especially
real.
like with my mom's book, that's like what she travels and speaks on is her life story.
Yeah.
So I'll have people coming up to me, talking to me about my grandparents that I've never met. And like talking like deep family stuff that
Yeah.
and I'm sure it's similar being pastors and
Yeah.
missionaries' kids. Like people are like faithful in your parents' church, or they follow and support your parents' ministry, and they know all these intricate things about your life, and they've never met you. It's kind of like a weird paradigm,
It is.
Yeah.
That's odd.
Can you think of any other stories?
Gosh, I don't really know. Other than like people, well, I've had some weird things where like people walk up to me and they'll ask me to like pray for them because I think they just think that because it's my dad's anointing, like it like falls on me a little. So like I've been put in some weird situations where people have come up to me and like been like, can you like pray for healing for this? And like when I was like little, like I would be like 10 and this person would be like, my son is missing a finger, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, and I'm just looking at his finger like I don't know,
or the lack of
yeah.
If you were looking at it, they came to the right person then.
Yeah, like just things like that. I think it's just
It's good.
that's just the only.
I had to. I'm sorry. You weren't looking at anything.
You weren't looking at it.
But like other than that, yeah, I think that's it. And then people, trying to get their kiddos to be friends with us. But to be honest, I kind of always just looked at it like, oh, I just get to make a new friend,
Yeah.
But other than that, yeah, I think that's it. It's so funny.
What would y'all say is one thing you're most grateful for being a missionary or pastor's kid?
Yeah. I think for me, I got to see up close and personal. It was like that dynamic of the greatest difficulty early on was that I didn't want to let people into this side of my life.
Yeah.
But even in that, like in privacy, my parents were actually so in love with Jesus, walking that relationship out. And because of what was happening in my home, it actually created like the greatest like opening to my own relationship with Jesus.
Yeah.
And that was, I couldn't ask for a better situation to be in to be able to understand what it looks like to walk with Jesus. And so I'm grateful for that because it kind of propelled me into just finding that for myself. And it made it easier because they understood. They understood the cost. They understood what it looked like to follow him. And so it just made it that much more when I did step into relationship with the Lord, that they could be there for me in those moments.
Yeah.
Say the same. I mean, grateful for my parents. They did such a good job of not only like protecting us, being like a really good covering, but it was so beautiful to be able to see that what happens in front of everybody else, in front of the congregation at our church, was even more sacred and more pursued behind closed doors.
Amazing.
And that rubs off on you. It's like, man, I want that tender heart that my dad has, and so it encourages that growth, that relationship with the Lord. And so,
Gosh, I think the thing that I'm most grateful for, I think always kind of growing up in that like really safe space, like you said, trusting your parents. Like I've always had really, really sweet parents who've always like, even if I didn't take it at times, I knew that like they were a safe space to go to like process. And I think that like that, and then I mentioned this earlier, but like I think that something that I've been struggling with, and also like I've met a bunch of people who have thought about this, and like some people have completely different perspectives. One thing that I'm super grateful for is the people who you meet around ministry. Like my dad, like recently I knew someone who knew my dad, but I got to build a relationship with them, and it kind of made me feel like, oh my gosh, they actually want, like, it sounds weird saying this, like they want me for me. They want me for my dad. And so like taking that connection, just kind of like making it like my own, I think, and like not taking advantage of things like that, but like, I think that yes, your parents, those were your parents' connections, but like if you can take that and like run with it, that could be like, does that make sense?
Yeah,
like that can be like yours.
Ceiling floor type of
Yes,
thing.
someone said that to me the other day. Like, explain that analogy. I didn't understand it.
So like their ceiling, like where they've gone and what they've done and the connections they've made have become yours. And if you take that on as more of a, like, this is my reality now to live in, and I get to enjoy not just you get to enjoy the benefits and more. That there actually is like a God connection for a reason. And so that's your floor.
There's a lot of craziness that happens in ministry that you you witness as like a minister or missionary's kid. But it's really amazing. But the people who are doing it right and who are sold out, and you see them running with your parents and staying close, it's like some of the best connections like you'd ever have.
It's really true.
And so the last thing I want to hit on, because I think it's important to talk about, is Can you think of instances where it was tough as a minister or missionary's kid, where you could see your parents, like where it felt like they could pour out to someone else, but you didn't necessarily feel like it was like that in the home? Because I think that's a reality. And how did you navigate that and grow through that situation?
I think for me, like my mom, she's very like motherly, like and she wants to mother everyone else. And there was a point in time where I was like, she just like, she's mothering everyone else, but she's not mothering me, which was totally a lie because she totally was. But like, I think it's also like not making it about yourself, but being like, oh, she actually gets to pour into these other women. Yeah. And I'm just honored to be raised up around it. And like, I get her at any point in time. Like she's mine before she's yours. Yeah. But like, it's still cool to see like how she does that with other women. But there was a time where I was like, what are
I think
doing?
that is a lie from the enemy that we hear a lot.
1000%.
Like, oh, they can take care of others, but not you. But really, they're giving their life for others so that they can raise you. And
exactly.
Yeah.
It is one of those things where I think when you get older, you start to have grace in those areas and realizing how much they're outpouring.
Early on, it's tough. Yeah.
And the weight that they're carrying is not. Most people should never have to carry some of like the things that they've walked through in ministry. And so with that understanding, like, and seeing that, and then they still gave over and above and more so to their children, I think is just a big part of understanding.
Yeah. I didn't witness, my parents, they did a really good job. You know, they did really well. And like when it was time at home, it's like they're going to pour into us and be very present. And so you definitely sensed it a couple times, the hospital calls, all the different things where it's like, oh, Pops has to run away for a little bit, but other than that, like they did such a good job at just being very present when they were there.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys. Well, that was an amazing conversation. I hope that it uplifted and encouraged people that are going through such a similar situation or upbringing. And I know there's so much hurt, like in the church in this area. There's the stereotypes about the pastor's kids and like what they go through. But I think this was an amazing opportunity to hear, especially positive examples of how the Lord uses families for ministry. So, guys, thank you for watching and joining in, and stay tuned for the next episode.